Alright YouTube, so we're back of course to talk about some Square Enix. So we recently got the 6-month fiscal year financial report for Square Enix, which Square Enix's fiscal year starts on April 1st, ends on March 31st of the next year. So the 6-month mark in this example would be October 31st. So obviously a little over a week ago, we've covered a lot of these throughout the last couple of years. Really when I started focusing in on Square Enix on the channel, sometime late 2018, early 2019, we've covered most of them that we see. And I cannot recall if we've ever covered one of these and seen Square Enix at a loss, but when it comes to this 6-month report, they're actually down 2.2% compared to last year, which doesn't sound like a lot. But we're talking about a big business like Square Enix that makes a shit ton of money every year. It's quite a bit of money. So 2.2% compared to last year in this case is equal to about $20 million loss. Square Enix's results for the first half of its financial year held relatively steady with only a 2.2% drop in net sales. For the 6 months ended September 30th, the company generated 168.9 billion yen, or $1.48 billion, in sales, a slight dip in the 172.7 billion yen, or $1.5 billion, achieved during the same period last year. So again, on paper, that doesn't look like a lot, but in terms of the amount of money we're talking about, and $0.02 of $1 billion is $20 million, you don't want to lose any money, especially that many millions, especially when you're a big company like this with all kinds of investors and shit like that. You just want to see success every year, every quarter, every fiscal year, every half of a fiscal year. You don't ever want to see numbers going down, but this isn't the only spot that when we're looking at this where they've actually been at a loss. Operating income was down 7.9% to 29 billion yen, while ordinary income actually rose 31% to 31.5 billion. So they saw some success there. But then it goes on. The bulk of its net sales were generated, as usual, by the digital entertainment segment, which handles its video games business. Sales for the division came in at 129.4 billion yen, but this was down 9% year on year. So we're looking at a 9% loss here. That's massive when we're talking about this amount of money, because even the 2.2%, like we just talked about, was $20 million. We're talking about a 9% loss year on year. That is insane. And I believe I did the math correctly, and I could be off a little bit on this. I think it's roughly about $90 million. Now we're getting to a lot of money. We're getting into almost a $100 million loss. That's a big deal. Now, this can obviously be attributed to last year's fiscal year having the launch of Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now, initially, the game was going to come out March of last year. If you guys remember that, I don't remember the exact date off the top of my head, but that would have put it in the previous fiscal year. They pushed it to April 10th, which, as we talked about, their fiscal years start on April 1st. So by pushing it to April 10th, push it into the next fiscal year, which is why 2020 was so successful. Well, I guess fiscal year 2021, but the year 2020 was successful for them. And I've said this before in the past on previous videos when we talked about this stuff. I think part of why they delayed Remake to April 10th was to push it into the next fiscal year to make sure that fiscal year 2021 was successful, because they were already successful with fiscal year 2020, which would be April 1st of 2019 all the way to March 31st of 2020. Because there's not really a point in having Remake come out at the end of the current fiscal year at the time when it was already successful. Push it to the next fiscal year and guarantees that one being a success, especially when it's a game like Final Fantasy VII Remake. You knew that game was going to make you an insane amount of money. Much of this can be attributed to the 40% drop in net sales for HD games, which fell from 57.9 billion yen for the first half of 2020 to 39.5 billion yen in the same period this year. So again, what we just talked about, from April 1st to September 30th of this year, there just hasn't been any big games comparable to Remake. And I guess they lump in Marvel's Avengers, but that game was a loss for them. It's like a $100 million loss for them. Now, that $100 million loss was November or so of last year when that article was put out. They've had almost a year now to make money with Marvel's Avengers. I don't know what it's at now, but currently, back then at the time, when the game was kind of newer, it was a major loss for them, dude. The publisher's key releases for the first half of the year included Outriders, Nier Replicant, Neo: The World Ends With You, and Life is Strange: True Colors, but these failed to deliver the sales seen when Final Fantasy VII Remake and Marvel's Avengers launched in the first half of 2020. So when it comes to those, I believe Neo: The World Ends With You and Outriders were newer IPs or brand new IPs or whatever, but obviously when it comes to Life is Strange and Nier Replicant, those are already established franchises. So it's kind of crazy that, especially with Nier being a mobile game, and it had a pretty big launch. I remember seeing 10 million downloads or some shit, really fast. It's crazy to think that being a mobile game didn't generate them a shit ton of money. You think it would. I don't know anything about the game, never even played it. Now, to be clear, mobile games and browser games were where they made the bulk of their money, and I don't know what the fuck browser games are. They made $546 million off of those alone, but they were still at a 2.2% loss year on year. While it remains the smallest subsegment, MMO net sales saw a big boost, up 32.5% year-on-year to 27.7 billion yen. This was attributed to the sharp growth in number of Final Fantasy XIV subscribers, with Square Enix hoping for a further boost from the game's Endwalker expansion this month. And I think if you guys had seen recently whenever they delayed Endwalker for like 2 weeks or whatever, like Yoshi P on like the live stream or the video, whatever it was like emotional and kind of tearing up. And I think this is a big part of it. Obviously, it sucks in general to have to delay something for a game, whether it's the launch, a DLC, expansion, whatever it is, because you want the fans to play it and enjoy it. But I think it's because there's a lot right on this game right now. Like, Final Fantasy XIV is the biggest MMO in the world. Like, it's by far the biggest. And when you're at the top, you got to remain at the top, and having to delay an update for the game, a big expansion, obviously that's going to burn a lot of players. I think most people are accepting of the fact that they want to delay it to make it good. But yeah, I think that's, looking back at it now, I think that's part of, a small part at least, of why he was maybe a little bit emotional. Because, like, man, they're making so much money off of Final Fantasy XIV right now. Now, obviously, I want to cover this just because we try to cover pretty much all the financial reports that ever come out for Square Enix, but also because an interesting update came out from this, and it's that Square Enix is wanting to go into blockchain gaming and NFTs, which, yeah, oh my god. Now, a lot of this is out of my wheelhouse, but I did a bit of quick research for the video, and from what I can gather for like blockchain gaming, like it has to do with like cryptocurrency. You can get cryptocurrency, like the items you get in game, you actually own them as like assets, and you can sell them for actual money or cryptocurrency or something. Like, it's crazy shit. Stuff I don't understand, and stuff I'm just personally not interested in. And NFTs are also something I'm not fucking interested in. Now, obviously, this stuff right now is hot. NFTs are relatively new still, and blockchain gaming, I've never heard of it till now, so I'm assuming it's relatively new as well. It's going to make them a lot of money. It's the hot thing right now, so I understand why they're doing it. But the discussion I want to have on the back end of this video after talking about all this is that I'm hoping this will make Square Enix focus up just a little bit when it comes to their big releases, because, again, just comparing this 6 months to last year's 6 months, like, they've lost money, right? 9% and shit. We're talking just video games, because they haven't had any big releases yet. And we know the Remake Part 2 is coming out at some point, and we know Final Fantasy 16 is coming out at some point. And it's been rumored for a while that there's Kingdom Hearts 4 eventually. Like, these are the big releases for Square Enix. And look, obviously we do not want them to rush this shit out. We want it to be a finished product. We want these games to be full of all kinds of things and content and all that other stuff, right? The stuff that goes without saying, yeah. But I hope that they focus up a bit, because they're turning into like Ubisoft and EA and what Bethesda's become, because now like Square Enix is just shitting out games all the time. Again, they had like 4 decent releases this year, 2 new IPs, 2 already established IPs, and they couldn't even compare it to just Remake's launch. Like, that's pathetic. That's ridiculous, man. Like, you drop how many games this year, and they cannot compare it to just Remake's launch during a pandemic. Like, that game's launch still made more money than all these other games combined. Like, that's ridiculous, man. Like, they need to focus up, and I hope, again, they buckle down and start really getting in on like Final Fantasy 16 and Remake Part 2, Kingdom Hearts 4, and any of the other big releases. Because, like, goddamn, like, where's 16, by the way? Like, we haven't talked about that in a while here on the channel. It's already like almost getting to halfway through November. Where's some 16 news at? What are we doing? And I'm not sure what like the pandemic is like in Japan currently. I know they've gone through like several lockdowns. I don't know if that's part of why like Final Fantasy 14 is getting like Endwalker delayed, because like that's getting delayed, and then we haven't heard anything from 16. We haven't heard anything for Part 2 for Remake and stuff like that. It's like, I don't know if it's the the COVID shit or just in general they're just not focusing enough on these games. I don't know. And I know that these games are like developed by completely different companies, but they're all still under the Square Enix umbrella. And again, I just need some focus here. That's all I want. Anyways, that's the video. It's longer than I want it to be. It's gonna be a late upload probably. That's gonna suck. My cat is scratching on my door, meowing, so I need to wrap this video up. Anyways, what are your thoughts on what we talked about in this video? In terms of, like, Endwalker being delayed, the zero news for 16, zero news for Part 2, like actual legitimate news, I mean. We obviously have heard some things. Do you think that's part of them just having too many games all the time? Or is it a COVID thing? Also, if you want to give your thoughts on Square Enix going into NFTs and blockchain gaming and whatever the hell that shit is, be sure to leave that below as well. Either way, that's the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you guys already want to see more Square Enix, Final Fantasy 7 Remake, Kingdom Hearts 4 if that ever happens, Final Fantasy 16, NFTs, if we're going to start covering those here on the channel too. I don't know, man. Turn on notifications, follow me on Twitter, @DavidYT. I'm a Discord, links to my social networks are in the description and in the outro. Later, guys.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like low gain or leave it like